Good morning, children. This is Grandma Carla, and today I have with me my precious granddaughter, Joanna. And Joanna is how old?
5.
5. And what are you learning to do in school right now, Joanna? You're trying to read? You're learning how to read? Isn't that wonderful? And Grandma's so glad to be here visiting with you. And I love you so much. And we're going to read Curious George Rides a Bike. This is George. He lived with his friend, the man with the yellow hat. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. This morning, George was curious the moment he woke up because he knew it was a special day. Here's a picture of George, and he knows that it is a very special day. What kind of day do you think it might be, Joanna? At breakfast, George's friend said, "Today we are going to celebrate because just 3 years ago this day, I brought you home with me from the jungle. So tonight, I'll take you to the animal show. But first, I have a surprise for you." He took George out to the yard where a big box was standing. And of course, George was very curious. So here's you can help me turn it around? It's a big book. Here they are at breakfast. And the man with the yellow hat tells him all about, and hold it straight. Hold it. There you go. And there's the big box. And the man with the yellow hat is opening up the big box. George was very curious. Out of the box came a what, Joanna?
A bike.
A bicycle. George was delighted. That's what he had always wanted. He knew how to ride a bicycle, but he had never had one of his very own. "I must go now," said the man, "but I'll be back in time for the show. Be careful with your new bike and keep close to the house while I'm gone." All right, let me show the pictures. Oh, such a big book. Okay, out comes a bicycle from the box, and there's the man with the yellow hat going off and leaving George to ride his bike. Okay? George could ride very well. He could even do all sorts of tricks. Monkeys are good at that. For instance, he could ride this way with both hands off the handlebar. He could ride this way like a cowboy on a wild bronco, and he could ride backwards. But after a while, George got tired of doing tricks and, all right, show us the pictures. No, he's riding with no hands, and he's riding like a cowboy on a bronco, and he can ride backwards. Okay, turn the page. And went out into the street. The newsboy was just passing by with his bag full of papers. "It's a fine bike you have there," he said to George. "How would you like to help me deliver the papers?" He handed George the bag and told him to do one side of the street first and then turn back and do the other side of the street. George was very proud as he rode off with his bag. Was George supposed to go off away from the house? All right, let's see what happens to George. Is he going to get into trouble again? There he is, meeting the newsboy. And there he is. Oh man, he's taking part of the newsboy's papers. He started to deliver the papers on one side of the street as he had been told. When he came to the last house, he saw a little river in the distance, and George was curious. He wanted to know what the river was like, so instead of turning back to deliver the rest of the papers, he just went on. Oh no, curious George, getting in trouble again because he's not following his instructions. He was too curious. Okay, there he is, delivering his papers like he's supposed to. And then, on the other side of the street, he sees a river and he just decides that he's going to keep going. There was a lot to see at the river. A man was fishing from the bridge, a duck family was paddling downstream, and two boys were playing with their boats. George would have liked to stop and look at the boats, but he was afraid the boys might find out that he had not delivered all the papers. So he rode on. Now George knows he's doing the wrong thing and keeps on doing it. There George goes on down the river, past the fishing man, and past the boys, and past the ducks. I'm going to turn it around. It's too big for Grandma with one hand. There we go. While riding along, George kept thinking of boats all the time. It would be such fun to have a boat, but how could he get one? He thought and he thought, and then he had an idea. He got off the bicycle, took out a newspaper out of the bag, and began to fold it. First, he folded down the corners like this. Okay, he folded down the corners, and then he folded both edges up, brought the ends together, and flattened it sidewise. Then he turned one corner up, and then the other one. Again, brought the ends together and flattened it sidewise. Then gently he pulled the ends open, and there was a boat. You see his boat? Now the moment had come to launch the boat. Would it float? It did. So George decided to make some more boats. Finally, he had used up all the papers and had made so many boats that he could not even count them. A whole fleet. What had George done? What did he do that was wrong, Joanna?
He went from the house.
And what did he do to the papers that did not belong to him?
He put them in the river.
He was supposed to give those to the people that had paid for the papers. They didn't belong to George. And he made them all into boats. Oh, my goodness. And there's all of the folds that George went through to make the cool little boats. And there is George setting the boats on the water to float. Watching his fleet sailing down the river, George felt like an admiral. But watching his fleet, he forgot to watch where he was going. Look how many boats he's got. Who's enjoying his boats? Look at all those animals enjoying his boats. What are some of the things that are on his boats? Ducks, frogs, bugs. Oh my goodness. And then George isn't watching where he's going. There's all of his boats. And there are the animals enjoying his boats. Look at all the animals inside his boats. But George is not watching where he is going. Come to his boat. Suddenly, there was a terrible jolt. The bicycle had hit a rock, and George flew off the seat, head first. Luckily, George was not hurt, but the front wheel of the bicycle was all out of shape, and the tire was blown out. First day on his brand new bike, and George has broken it. Oh my goodness. Okay, let me turn the bike up. So strong. Okay, there's George. He hits a rock. He goes flying off, and he's not terribly hurt, but look at his bicycle, all crumpled up. At least the first wheel was damaged. George tried to ride the bicycle, but of course it wouldn't go. So he started carrying it, but it soon got too heavy. George did not know what to do. His new bike was spoiled. The newspapers were gone. He wished he had listened to his friend and kept close to the house. Now he just stood there and cried. And suddenly his face brightened. Why, he had forgotten that he could ride on one wheel. He tried it, and it worked. He had hardly started out again when he saw something. There he's able to ride on one wheel because he's a little trickster. Okay, there's George. And there he is, not knowing what to do with his bike. Let's show the other page. And there he is, thinking, what can I do? And he decides to ride on the back wheel. He saw something he had never seen before. Rolling toward him came an enormous tractor with huge trailers behind it. Looking out of the trailers were all sorts of animals. To George, it looked like a zoo on wheels. The tractor stopped, and let's see what it looks like. Oh, there's George. He spots a big truck. And what's in the truck? Animals. Okay, I need it over here so I can read it, okay? The tractor stopped, and 2 men jumped out. Well, said one of the men, a little monkey who can ride a bike, bronco fashion. We can use you in our animal show tonight. I am the director of the show, and this is Bob. We can straighten your wheel and fix that flat in no time, and then we'll take you along to the place where the show is going to be. So the 3 of them got into the cab and drove off. Maybe you could play a fanfare while you ride your bike in the show, the director said. I have a bugle for you right here, and later on you'll get a green coat and a cap, just like Bob's. Uh-oh. Now who has George gone off with? The circus man. He meets the circus man, and the man picks up his bike. It says he can fix it, and then they put the bike on the top, and there's George going off in the big truck with the people. Okay, sit it on my lap. On the showgrounds, everybody was getting things ready for the show. I must do some work now, said the director. Maybe you might have a look around and get acquainted with all of the animals. But no, shut the door. But you must not feed them, especially the ostrich, because he will eat anything and might get very sick afterwards. Look at all of the people in the circus, and here are the people all doing something to get ready for the big show. And there's the man talking to George and telling him he may visit the animals, but not to feed the ostrich. And George was curious. Would the ostrich really eat anything? He wouldn't eat a bugle, or would he? George went a little closer to the cage, and before he knew it, the ostrich had snatched the bugle and tried to swallow it. But a bugle is hard to swallow, even for an ostrich. It got stuck in his throat. Funny sounds came out of the bugle as the ostrich was struggling with it, all blue in the face. George was frightened. Look, oh no, the ostrich did eat the bugle. Your grandma will show you the pictures.
What is the bugle?
Fortunately, the men had heard the noise. They came rushing to the cage and got the bugle out of the ostrich's throat, just in time. The director was very angry with George. "We cannot use little monkeys who don't do as they are told," he said. "Of course, you cannot take part in the show now. We will have to send you home." George had to sit on a bench all by himself, and nobody even looked at him. He was terribly sorry for what he had done, but now it was too late. He had spoiled everything. Poor George. He just doesn't learn. So they got the bugle out of the ostrich's throat, and they made George sit on a bench and not be in the show. Meanwhile, the ostrich, always hungry, had got hold of a string dangling near his cage. This happened to be the string which held the door to the cage of the baby bear. As the ostrich nibbled at it, the door opened and the baby bear got out. He ran away as fast as he could and made straight for a high tree near the camp. Nobody had seen it but George, and George was not supposed to leave his bench. But this was an emergency, so he jumped up, grabbed the bugle, and blew as loud as he could. And then he rushed to his bicycle. The men had heard the alarm and thought at first that George had been naughty again. But when they saw the empty cage and the ostrich nibbling at the string, they knew what had happened. So there's George sitting on his bench, but the ostrich being naughty and opening the cage, the bear getting out, the bear running away, and George sounding the alarm for all to hear. George raced toward the tree, far ahead of the men. By now, the bear had climbed quite high, and this was dangerous because little bears can climb up a tree easily, but coming down is much harder. They may fall and get hurt. The men were worried. They did not know how to get him down safely, but George had his plan. With the bag over his shoulder, he went up the tree as fast as only a monkey can. And when he reached the baby bear, he put him in his bag and carefully let him down so that the men could safely catch him. So here's the picture of George rushing to the rescue. The poor little bear is up in a tree. And then George gets up close and the men are ready to catch him. Everybody cheered when George had come down from the tree. "You are a brave little monkey," said the director. "You saved the baby bear's life. Now you'll get your coat back, and of course, you may ride your bike and play the bugle in the show." There's the baby bear and George letting him down in his bag. And there's George getting back his bugle and his little green coat. Finally, the show was on. The whole town had come to see it, and how surprised they were to discover George on his bike right in the middle of it. The newsboy was there too, and also the man with the yellow hat. There is George riding his bike. You see his bike? And there's the whole circus. Look at that circus and everybody there to watch him. Uriah, you're in the middle of the page, honey. See? Grandma will show it to you. Who had been looking for George everywhere and was happy to have found him at last. Who was looking for George? The man with the yellow hat. The newsboy was glad to have his bag again, and the people from the other side of the street, whose paper George had made into boats, were not angry with him anymore. When the time had come for George to say goodbye, the director let him keep the coat and the cap and the bugle, and then George and his friend got into the car and went home. Here's the story. Here's the George seeing the man with the yellow hat again. Oh, they were glad to see each other. And here is the picture of George getting back in the car, and he had made a lot of friends after all. The little bear and the circus man are waving goodbye, and they let George keep his coat and his hat and his bugle. And then they drive home in their little blue car. And that was the story of the bike. And the next time we'll read Curious George Gets a Medal. Thanks for reading with me. I love you.